I never thought my own brother would be the one to break my daughter's heart. But there I was sitting at Derek's kitchen table on a sunny Sunday afternoon in May, watching my 7-year-old daughter Emma's face crumble as his words hit her like a physical blow. We had gathered for our usual family dinner at my younger brother's suburban Columbus home, the kind of modest 2-story house with vinyl siding that screamed middle-class stability. Emma had been playing with her cousin Tyler in the living room, their laughter echoing through the open floor plan as they built elaborate towers with wooden blocks. When Derek announced Tyler's elementary school graduation party plans, with obvious pride in his voice, I casually asked if Emma could attend, since the girls were practically inseparable. His response cut through the warm family atmosphere like a knife through butter. "Your daughter isn't important enough to be invited to my child's graduation party." Emma's bright brown eyes immediately filled with tears that threatened to spill over her round cheeks. I looked around the suddenly silent room at my parents, my sister-in-law Jennifer, and the other family members who had gone completely still. Then I pulled out my phone with hands that trembled slightly from the rage building in my chest. My fingers moved across the screen with deliberate precision as I scrolled through my contacts and found the number I needed. Derek's arrogant smirk began to falter when he realized I was actually making a call rather than backing down from his cruel declaration. I pressed the speaker button and placed the phone on the polished wooden table where everyone could hear clearly. "Marcus, it's Ashley," I said when my ex-husband answered on the second ring. "I'm here with the whole family and I need you to hear what just happened to our daughter." Derek immediately started backpedaling, his confident posture deflating like a punctured balloon. "Ashley, wait, I didn't mean it like that. I was just saying that the party is going to be small and—" "No, Derek." I interrupted, my voice steady despite the fury coursing through my veins. "You said Emma isn't important enough. Those were your exact words. Marcus, your daughter, just asked if she could attend her cousin's graduation party, and my brother told her she wasn't important enough to be there." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several heartbeats before Marcus spoke, and when he did, his voice carried the kind of controlled anger that made grown men step back. He said what to my little girl? Derek told Emma she wasn't important enough to attend Tyler's graduation party. I repeated, making sure every syllable was crystal clear. "She's sitting right here with tears in her eyes because her uncle just told her she doesn't matter." What happened next caught everyone off guard, including me. Marcus, who had been deployed overseas for the past 8 months and had limited contact due to his military obligations, suddenly sounded different. His voice carried a new authority that I had never heard before. "Well, Derek, since we're all being honest here, maybe it's time I shared some interesting news. I've been promoted to colonel, and I've been planning a surprise visit home next week with some important information for Ashley. But since we're having this conversation, let me tell you about the fascinating phone calls I've been receiving." Derek's face went pale, and Jennifer grabbed his arm with obvious concern. My parents exchanged confused glances while I watched my brother's expression shift from arrogance to genuine fear. You see, Derek Marcus continued his military training, evident in the way he controlled the entire conversation. "I've been getting calls from you for the past 6 months, calls where you've been telling me that Ashley is an unfit mother, that she's financially irresponsible, and that I should consider pursuing full custody of Emma. Calls where you've been asking me for money, claiming that Ashley approved these conversations and wanted you to act as an intermediary." The room erupted in shocked gasps. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, and Jennifer's eyes widened as she stared at her husband in disbelief. Derek opened his mouth to speak, but Marcus wasn't finished. "The interesting thing is, Derek, I've been recording these calls, every single one of them, because something didn't feel right about a man who would call another man's ex-wife unfit, while simultaneously asking that same man for loans. So I started documenting everything. Your claims about Ashley's supposed drug use, which we both know is completely false. Your suggestions that I should reduce my child support payments because you claimed Ashley was spending the money on herself rather than Emma. Your detailed descriptions of Ashley's supposed boyfriends, which was particularly interesting, since Ashley and I talk regularly, and I know she hasn't been dating anyone. Derek's face had gone from pale to ashen gray. He looked like a man who had just realized he was standing on quicksand. Jennifer released his arm and took a step away from him, her expression shifting from confusion to horror as the implications of Marcus's words sank in. So when my daughter's uncle tells her she's not important enough to attend a family celebration, I have to wonder if this is part of the same pattern of behavior that's been going on behind the scenes. The same pattern where Derek has been systematically trying to turn me against the mother of my child while portraying himself as the concerned family member, just looking out for everyone's best interests. Derek finally found his voice, but it came out as a strangled whisper. "Marcus, I can explain. I was just trying to—" "You were trying to what Derek manipulate me into believing lies about Ashley so I would give you money. Destroy my relationship with my ex-wife so you could position yourself as the reasonable one. Turn me against my own daughter's mother for your personal gain." The weight of Marcus's words settled over the room like a suffocating blanket. Tyler had stopped playing and was now standing in the doorway, confused by the tension radiating from every adult in the space. Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her small hand and looked up at me with the kind of trust that reminded me why I would move mountains to protect her. "Derek." Marcus continued, his voice now carrying the full authority of his military rank. "I want you to know that I'm forwarding all of these recorded conversations to my attorney. Defamation of character, attempted parental alienation, and fraud are serious charges. I'll be in Columbus next week, and we're going to have a very different kind of conversation about what's best for my daughter. And Derek, if you ever speak to Emma like that again, you'll discover exactly why they promoted me to colonel." The following morning brought an unexpected phone call that would shatter what remained of my assumptions about my family dynamics. I was getting Emma ready for school, braiding her long auburn hair, while she ate her breakfast of scrambled eggs and wheat toast, when my cell phone rang. The caller ID showed a Florida number that I recognized but hadn't seen in over 2 years. "Ashley, sweetheart, it's your grandmother Patricia." My maternal grandmother's voice carried the same warm authority that I remembered from my childhood, though I detected an underlying steel that seemed sharper than before. Patricia had been largely absent from our family gatherings since she moved to Clearwater after my grandfather's death, and our relationship had become distant due to what I assumed was her natural preference for Derek's more traditional family structure. "Grandma Patricia, this is such a surprise," I said, motioning for Emma to continue eating while I stepped into the kitchen hallway for privacy. "Honey, I've been having some very interesting conversations with Marcus over the past few months, and I think it's time you knew what's really been happening in this family." My stomach dropped. If Marcus had been talking to my grandmother, then the web of deception Derek had been weaving was clearly much larger than I had realized. "Marcus reached out to me after Derek started calling him with those lies about you. Your ex-husband is a smart man, Ashley, and he knew something wasn't right about Derek's stories. So he did some investigating and he contacted me to see if I had any insight into Derek's behavior." I sank into one of the kitchen chairs, my legs suddenly feeling unsteady. "Grandma, I had no idea that Derek was even talking to you regularly." Patricia's laugh held no humor whatsoever. "Oh, Derek has been calling me every few weeks for the past year, sweetheart. He's been telling me quite a story about your financial irresponsibility and your supposedly poor parenting choices. He's been suggesting that when the time comes to discuss my estate planning, I should consider leaving my assets to Tyler rather than Emma, since you clearly can't be trusted to handle money properly." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Not only had Derek been trying to turn Marcus against me, but he had been working to manipulate my own grandmother into cutting Emma out of her inheritance. The calculated cruelty of it took my breath away. But here's what Derek doesn't know. Patricia continued, her voice taking on a tone that reminded me why she had been such a successful businesswoman before retirement. I've been recording every single one of our conversations. I may be 78 years old, but I'm not naive, and I've seen enough family manipulation in my lifetime to recognize it when it's happening. I pressed my free hand against my forehead, trying to process the scope of Derek's betrayal. Grandma, I don't understand why he would do this. Money and control, sweetheart. It always comes down to money and control. Derek has been under the impression that I'm worth considerably more than I actually am, thanks to some exaggerated stories your mother shared about my investments. He's been positioning himself as the responsible family member who should be trusted with financial decisions while painting you as the irresponsible single mother who can't manage her own life. Patricia paused, and I could hear her taking a sip of what I assumed was her morning coffee. But Derek made one crucial mistake. He underestimated me, and he underestimated the relationships I've been quietly maintaining. Marcus has been keeping me updated on Emma's progress in school, her swimming lessons, and her artwork. He's been sending me photos and videos that Derek never bothered to share. I've been watching my great-granddaughter grow up through her father's eyes rather than through this family's filtered version of events. The implications were staggering. While Derek had been actively trying to isolate me from family support, Marcus and my grandmother had been building their own relationship based on truth rather than manipulation. There's something else you need to know, Ashley. Your mother, Linda, has been feeding Derek information about your personal life. Every time you confide in her about your struggles with work money or dating, she's been sharing those conversations with Derek. He's been using your own mother's concern for you as ammunition in his campaign to undermine your credibility with Marcus and with me. I closed my eyes, feeling the sting of betrayal from multiple directions. My own mother had been unknowingly providing Derek with the very information he needed to construct his lies. Grandma, I don't know what to say. I had no idea any of this was happening. Of course you didn't, sweetheart. You've been too busy being a good mother and building a decent life for yourself and Emma to notice the snakes in your own garden. But here's what's going to happen next. I'm flying to Columbus tomorrow morning, and I'm bringing my attorney with me. Derek thinks he's been clever, but he's about to discover that his grandmother isn't quite the frail old woman he's been counting on manipulating. Patricia's tone shifted to something that reminded me of a general preparing for battle. I'm going to Tyler's graduation ceremony, whether I'm invited or not, and I'm going to make sure that everyone understands exactly how proud I am of both of my great-grandchildren. Derek wants to play games with family loyalty. He's about to learn what real family loyalty looks like. The conversation ended with Patricia promising to call me with her flight details and a warning to keep our discussion private until she arrived. I sat in my kitchen for several minutes after hanging up, trying to process the fact that my 78-year-old grandmother had been conducting her own investigation into Derek's behavior while simultaneously maintaining a relationship with my ex-husband and planning what sounded like a very dramatic confrontation. Emma appeared in the doorway, her backpack slung over her small shoulders and her lunchbox in her hand. "Mommy, are you okay? You look sad." I pulled her into a hug, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo and feeling a surge of protective love that reminded me why this fight was worth having. "I'm fine, baby. Grandma Patricia is coming to visit us, and she's going to make sure that you know how special and important you are. The grandma from Florida who sends me birthday cards. That's the one. And Emma. No matter what anyone says, you are important enough for everything. Don't ever forget that." Tuesday afternoon at the dental practice where I worked as a hygienist brought another piece of Derek's puzzle into sharp focus, though it came from a source I never expected. Maria Gonzalez, my closest colleague, and the person who covered my patients when Emma was sick, noticed my distracted demeanor as I prepared instruments for our afternoon appointments. "Ashley, you've been different since yesterday," Maria said, adjusting her scrubs and settling into the chair next to my workstation. "Usually you're chatting about Emma's latest art project or complaining about the traffic on Route 33, but today you're barely speaking. What's going on?" Maria and I had developed a friendship that extended beyond work over the past 3 years. She was the kind of person who remembered your coffee order and always had emergency goldfish crackers in her desk drawer for unexpected kid situations. Her genuine concern made me realize how much I needed to share the burden of what I was discovering about my family. I gave her a condensed version of Sunday's confrontation and Monday's revelation from my grandmother, watching her dark eyes widen with each detail. When I finished, Maria was quiet for a long moment, her expression shifting from sympathy to something that looked distinctly uncomfortable. "Ashley, I need to tell you something, but I don't want you to think I was keeping secrets from you intentionally." My stomach clenched with the familiar dread that had become my constant companion since Derek's cruel comment to Emma. "What is it?" "Your sister-in-law Jennifer has been a patient here for about 6 months. She comes in for cleanings and dental work, but that's not the problem. The problem is what she's been saying in the waiting room." Maria looked genuinely pained as she continued. "She's been talking to other patients about your family situation, not in a gossipy way, but in a concerned family member way that makes it sound like she's trying to be supportive while actually sharing very private information about you." I felt my blood pressure rising as the implications sank in. "What kind of things has she been saying?" "She's told people that you're struggling as a single mother, that you're jealous of Derek's success and stability, and that you've been asking the family for money to support Emma. She's made it sound like Derek and your parents have been financially supporting you and Emma out of generosity and that you're ungrateful for their help." The betrayal felt like a punch to the solar plexus. Not only had Jennifer been spreading lies about my financial situation, but she'd been doing it in my workplace in front of people who knew me professionally. "There's more," Maria said reluctantly. "She's told multiple patients that Emma has behavioral problems, and that's why she doesn't get invited to family events. She's made it sound like you're in denial about your daughter's issues, and that the family has had to make difficult decisions about including Emma in activities because of her supposed behavioral challenges." I gripped the arms of my chair to keep my hands from shaking. Emma was one of the most well-behaved children in her second-grade class, a fact that her teacher had mentioned repeatedly during parent conferences. The idea that Jennifer had been portraying my daughter as a problem child to strangers was almost more infuriating than Derek's direct cruelty. "Maria, why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I wasn't sure if it was my place, and because I was hoping it would stop on its own. But after hearing what Derek said to Emma, I realized this isn't just family drama. This is a deliberate campaign to damage your reputation and make you look like an irresponsible parent." Maria leaned forward, lowering her voice even though we were alone in the prep room. "Dr. Thompson has been getting complaints about you from some of the patients who've talked to Jennifer. Nothing specific enough to warrant disciplinary action, but general concerns about your professionalism and reliability. I convinced him to let me handle it by talking to you directly, but I've been trying to figure out how to bring it up without sounding crazy." The scope of Derek and Jennifer's coordinated attack was becoming clearer, and it was far more extensive than I had imagined. They weren't just trying to isolate me from family support. They were actively working to undermine my professional reputation in our small community. Some of the patients have mentioned that Jennifer told them you've been having financial difficulties and that might affect your focus at work. Others have heard that you're dealing with personal family drama that's been disruptive to your home life. It's all phrased as concern for your well-being, but the effect is to make people question your competence and stability. I thought about the subtle changes I had noticed in some of my long-term patients over the past few months. Mrs. Henderson, who usually chatted about her grandchildren during her cleanings, had become more reserved. Mr. Kowalski, who always asked about Emma's school activities, had stopped mentioning her entirely. I had attributed these changes to normal variations in patient relationships, but now I understood they were the result of Jennifer's calculated poison. "Maria, do you think Dr. Thompson would be willing to meet with me if I wanted to address this directly?" "I think he would be relieved to understand what's actually been happening. He likes you, Ashley, and he's been confused by the complaints because they don't match the employee he knows. If you can explain the situation, especially with evidence, I think he'll be very supportive. The evidence. Between Marcus's recorded phone calls and my grandmother's documentation, I was beginning to realize that Derek and Jennifer's campaign against me might actually be well documented enough to constitute legal harassment. "There's one more thing," Maria said hesitantly. "Jennifer scheduled another appointment for next week, and she specifically requested to be in your schedule. At the time, I thought she was trying to be supportive by choosing you as her hygienist, but now I'm wondering if she's planning to continue her campaign more directly." The idea of having Jennifer in my chair vulnerable and dependent on my professional care, while knowing that she had been systematically destroying my reputation, filled me with a cold fury that surprised me with its intensity. "Maria, would you be willing to document what you've heard and observed? If this goes legal, witness testimony could be important." "Absolutely. And Ashley, I'm really sorry this has been happening. Jennifer seemed so nice and concerned about you that I never suspected she had ulterior motives. It's a good reminder that some people are very skilled at appearing caring while actually being destructive." As we prepared for our afternoon patients, I felt the weight of understanding settle over me. This wasn't a simple family disagreement that had gotten out of hand. Derek and Jennifer had been conducting a systematic campaign to isolate me, undermine my credibility, and position themselves as the responsible family members who needed to step in and manage my life for Emma's benefit. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated the people who actually knew me, and they had left a trail of evidence that was about to become their downfall. Wednesday evening brought a discovery that transformed my anger into a cold, calculating determination for justice. I was sitting at my kitchen table organizing paperwork for Patricia's attorney visit when I found a manila folder buried in my filing cabinet that I hadn't opened in over 2 years. The folder contained documents related to my parents' auto repair business, including partnership agreements and inheritance planning papers that I had signed years earlier without paying close attention to the fine print. As I spread the documents across my kitchen table under the bright overhead light, a detail jumped out at me that made my blood run cold. On 3 separate official documents, my signature appeared in places where I knew I had never signed. The handwriting was clearly meant to mimic mine, but the differences were obvious once I looked closely. The spacing was wrong, the pressure was inconsistent, and the angle of my letters was subtly different from my natural writing style. More disturbing was what these forged signatures had authorized. According to the paperwork, I had apparently agreed to have Derek serve as my financial representative for any business-related matters concerning my parents' shop. This designation gave him the authority to make decisions about my potential inheritance, my share of any business profits, and my involvement in major financial planning decisions. I called my parents immediately, my hands trembling as I dialed their number. My father answered on the 3rd ring, his voice carrying the tired satisfaction of a man who had just finished a long day working with his hands. "Dad, I need to ask you about some business documents that have my signature on them, but I don't remember signing them." There was a pause before my father responded, and when he did, his voice carried a note of confusion. "What kind of documents, Ashley?" "Partnership agreements and financial planning papers that apparently make Derek my representative for business decisions. Dad, I never signed these papers, but my signature is on them." The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough for me to hear my mother's voice in the background, asking what was wrong. When my father spoke again, his tone had shifted to something I recognized from my childhood as his serious voice. "Ashley, Derek told us that you had asked him to handle your business interests because you felt overwhelmed by the financial complexity. He said you had signed the papers at his house during one of the family dinners, and he brought them to us later." The betrayal was so complete and so calculated that I had to sit down to process it fully. Derek had forged my signature to steal my legal rights to my own inheritance, and he had convinced our parents that this theft was actually a favor he was doing for their overwhelmed daughter. Dad, I never asked Derek to represent me financially, and I never signed those papers. I need you to check your records and tell me if Derek has received any payments or benefits that were supposed to come to me. Another long pause followed by muffled conversation between my parents. When my father returned to the phone, his voice sounded older and more tired than it had moments earlier. Ashley, Derek has been receiving your portion of the quarterly profit sharing for the past 2 years. We've been sending him checks for about $300 every 3 months, thinking we were helping you by having him manage the money responsibly. $600 a year might not sound like much to some people, but as a single mother working as a dental hygienist, that money represented Emma's swimming lessons, her school supplies, and the small luxuries that made our life more comfortable. Derek had been stealing money that rightfully belonged to my daughter, while simultaneously portraying me as financially irresponsible. Dad, there's more. Derek has been calling Marcus and my grandmother with lies about my parenting and my financial stability. He's been trying to turn my own family against me while literally stealing money that belongs to Emma and me. I heard my mother take the phone from my father, her voice shaky with what I recognized as the beginning of tears. Ashley, honey, we had no idea. Derek told us that you were struggling to manage money and that you had asked him to help you budget and save. He said the arrangement was temporary until you got more stable. The systematic nature of Derek's deception was staggering. He had convinced our parents that stealing from me was actually helping me while using their participation in his fraud as evidence of my incompetence to other family members. Mom, I need you and Dad to gather all the paperwork related to these arrangements and not give Derek any more money until we can sort this out legally. I'm going to have a lawyer look at these forged signatures, and there are going to be serious consequences for what Derek has done. My mother's crying was audible now, and I felt a pang of sympathy for my parents, even as I dealt with my own rage and betrayal. They had been manipulated just as thoroughly as Marcus and my grandmother, though their participation in Derek's schemes had caused real financial harm to Emma and me. Ashley, we're so sorry. We thought we were helping you. Derek made it sound like you were too proud to ask for help directly, so we were trying to support you in a way that wouldn't hurt your feelings. The cruel irony was that my parents' love for me had been weaponized by Derek to justify stealing from me. He had used their desire to help their struggling daughter as cover for his own greed and manipulation. After hanging up with my parents, I spent the next hour documenting every forged signature and calculating exactly how much money Derek had stolen from Emma and me over the past 2 years. The total came to approximately $1,200 in direct theft, plus the lost interest and financial planning opportunities that the money could have provided. But the financial fraud was about more than money. Derek had systematically undermined my legal rights, my family relationships, and my ability to provide for my daughter, all while positioning himself as the responsible family member who was protecting everyone from my supposed inadequacies. I photographed every document, created a detailed timeline of Derek's lies and manipulations, and prepared a comprehensive report for Patricia's attorney. Derek had made the mistake of leaving a paper trail, and that trail was going to be his downfall. As I sealed the documents in a new folder labeled Evidence, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt and confusion of the past few days was crystallizing into a focused determination to ensure that Derek faced real consequences for the harm he had caused to Emma and to our entire family. He had gambled that I would be too trusting, too overwhelmed, and too isolated to fight back effectively. He was about to discover exactly how wrong he had been. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp May sunshine that made Columbus feel like the perfect place to raise a family, though the irony wasn't lost on me as I prepared for what I knew would be the most confrontational day of my adult life. Patricia had arrived Thursday evening with her attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine Morrison, who specialized in financial fraud and family law. After reviewing all the evidence we had compiled, Catherine confirmed that Derek's actions constituted multiple felonies and advised us to proceed with a public confrontation that would be witnessed by as many people as possible. Emma wore her favorite blue dress with white flowers, the one that made her brown eyes sparkle and her auburn hair shine like polished copper. She'd been confused by my explanation that we were going to Tyler's graduation ceremony, even though Derek hadn't invited us, but her natural optimism had reasserted itself when I told her that Grandma Patricia and her daddy would be there to support her. Marcus had arrived in Columbus the night before, impressive in his dress uniform with the new colonel insignia gleaming on his shoulders. Seeing him in person for the first time since his promotion reminded me why I had fallen in love with him during our college years, though our relationship had evolved into something much more functional and respectful than romantic. "Are you ready for this?" Marcus asked as we met in the parking lot of Riverside Elementary School, Tyler's school, where the graduation ceremony was being held in the gymnasium. "As ready as I can be," I replied, though my heart was beating fast enough to make me feel slightly dizzy. Patricia and Catherine are already inside, and they've positioned themselves where Derek can't avoid seeing them. The elementary school graduation ceremony was a charming small-town affair with proud parents filling the gymnasium bleachers and children in tiny caps and gowns, looking both excited and nervous about their transition to middle school. I spotted Derek and Jennifer immediately sitting in the third row with my parents and looking like the picture-perfect nuclear family that Derek had always wanted to project. Derek's face went white when he saw Marcus, Emma, and me enter the gymnasium together. His expression shifted to something approaching panic when he noticed Patricia waving enthusiastically at Emma from the opposite side of the gym, clearly visible to everyone in attendance. We took seats directly behind Derek's family, close enough for him to feel our presence, but positioned so that we wouldn't disrupt the ceremony for the children. Emma sat between Marcus and me, looking beautiful and confident, despite the family drama swirling around her. The ceremony proceeded normally until the moment when the principal invited family members to stand and applaud for all the graduating students. Patricia rose to her feet with the energy of a woman, half her age, and called out in a voice that carried clearly across the gymnasium. "I'm so proud of both my great-grandchildren today, Tyler for graduating, and Emma for being such a wonderful, important little girl who deserves to celebrate with her family." The pointed emphasis on important wasn't lost on anyone within hearing distance, especially Derek, who turned around in his seat to glare at me with undisguised fury. Jennifer grabbed his arm, probably trying to prevent him from making a scene, but Derek's control was clearly slipping. After the ceremony, as families gathered in the school hallway for photographs and congratulations, Derek approached our group with the kind of aggressive posture that made Marcus automatically step closer to Emma and me. "You had no right to come here." Derek hissed, his voice low but audible to several nearby families. "This is Tyler's day and you're ruining it with your drama." Patricia stepped forward with the confident bearing of a woman who had spent decades managing difficult business negotiations. "Derek, sweetie, this is a public school ceremony celebrating all the children who are moving on to middle school. Emma is Tyler's cousin and she has every right to be here to support him." "She wasn't invited," Derek said, his voice rising despite his obvious attempt to maintain control. "I specifically told Ashley that Emma wasn't welcome at Tyler's party, and now she's trying to force her way into everything." The conversations around us had quieted as other parents became aware of the tension in our group. I noticed several mothers exchanging glances and moving closer, clearly trying to understand what was happening. Derek. Marcus said, his military bearing making him seem larger and more authoritative than usual. "Perhaps you'd like to explain to everyone here exactly what you told my daughter about her importance to this family." Derek's face flushed red as he realized that Marcus's question had been loud enough for several nearby families to hear clearly. "I didn't say anything inappropriate. I just said that the party was going to be small and we couldn't accommodate everyone." Emma looked up at me with confusion, and I could see that she was beginning to understand that the adults were arguing about her. The protective instinct that every mother recognizes surged through me, and I decided that Derek's public reputation was about to become collateral damage in his war against my daughter. "Derek, you told Emma that she wasn't important enough to be invited to Tyler's graduation party," I said clearly, making sure my voice carried to the families who were now openly listening to our conversation. "Those were your exact words to a 7-year-old child. You looked my daughter in the eyes and told her she wasn't important enough." The reaction from the nearby parents was immediate and visceral. I heard several gasps and saw mothers instinctively pull their own children closer as they processed what Derek had said to Emma. One father shook his head in disgust, and a mother I didn't recognize whispered something to her husband that made him frown in Derek's direction. Derek realized that his public image was crumbling in real time, and his response was to double down on his aggression. "Emma is not my responsibility," he said loudly, abandoning any pretense of keeping the conversation private. "I have my own family to worry about, and I don't owe Ashley anything just because she can't manage her own life." The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud, and I watched as several parents looked at Derek with the kind of disgust usually reserved for people who kick puppies. One mother approached our group directly, her expression clearly sympathetic as she addressed Emma. "Sweetheart, you look absolutely beautiful today, and any family would be lucky to have such a lovely little girl celebrate with them." Another parent. A father I recognized from school pickup but had never spoken to directly stepped forward with obvious anger directed at Derek. "I don't know what your family situation is, but I've got to tell you that what you said to that little girl is completely unacceptable. Children should never be told they're not important enough for anything." Derek's public meltdown was complete, but he seemed incapable of stopping himself. "You people don't know what you're talking about. This family has been dealing with Ashley's problems for years, and we've been trying to help her even though she's ungrateful and irresponsible." Patricia stepped forward again, and this time her voice carried the kind of authority that made everyone in the hallway pay attention. "Derek, I think it's time you met my attorney, Catherine Morrison. She's been very interested in hearing about your family helping strategies, especially the ones involving forged signatures and stolen money." The school hallway was not the ideal location for a legal confrontation, but Catherine Morrison adapted to the circumstances with the skill of someone who had spent decades handling family disputes. She approached Derek with a leather portfolio in her hand and the kind of confident smile that experienced attorneys use when they know they hold all the winning cards. "Mr. Derek Thompson, my name is Catherine Morrison, and I represent Ashley and Emma in a matter concerning financial fraud, defamation, and parental alienation. I have some documents that I believe will interest you very much." Derek's aggressive posture crumbled as the reality of his situation became clear. The nearby parents had stepped back to give our group more space, but they remained close enough to observe what was clearly a serious legal matter unfolding in their children's school. Catherine opened her portfolio and removed a thick stack of papers that I recognized as copies of all the evidence we had compiled over the past week. These documents include recorded phone conversations between you and Marcus Williams, recorded conversations between you and Patricia Anderson testimony from multiple witnesses regarding your defamation campaign against Ashley, and forensic analysis of forged signatures on financial documents. Jennifer, who had been standing silently beside Derek throughout the confrontation, suddenly stepped forward with an expression that looked like dawning horror. "Derek, what is she talking about? What forged signatures?" Catherine turned to Jennifer with professional courtesy that didn't hide the steel underneath. "Mrs. Thompson, your husband has been forging Ashley's signature on business documents that give him legal authority over her financial interests. He's been receiving money that rightfully belongs to Ashley and Emma, while simultaneously telling family members that Ashley is financially irresponsible." The color drained from Jennifer's face as she stared at her husband with what looked like complete shock. "Derek, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you haven't been stealing money from Ashley." Derek's silence was answer enough, and Jennifer's expression shifted from shock to something that looked like disgust. "Oh my God, Derek, how could you do this to your own sister?" Catherine continued with the methodical precision of someone who had delivered this kind of news many times before. Mr. Thompson, you've committed multiple felonies, including fraud, identity theft, and defamation. However, we're prepared to offer you an opportunity to resolve this matter without criminal prosecution, provided you meet certain conditions. Marcus stepped forward, his military bearing making him appear even more imposing next to Derek's now completely deflated posture. The conditions are simple, Derek. You're going to return every penny you've stolen from Ashley and Emma with interest. You're going to sign a sworn affidavit admitting to the financial fraud and the defamation campaign. You're going to contact everyone you've lied to and retract your statements about Ashley's parenting and financial responsibility. And you're going to stay away from my daughter unless Ashley specifically invites you to family events. Patricia added her own terms with the satisfaction of someone who had been planning this moment for months. Derek, you're also going to discover that my will has been updated to reflect my new understanding of your character. Emma will inherit everything that I originally planned to leave to Tyler, and Tyler will receive the amount I originally planned for Emma. I believe in rewarding integrity and punishing greed. Derek finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. Grandma, please. I was just trying to help the family stay together. I thought Ashley needed guidance, and I was trying to protect everyone. You were trying to steal money from a single mother while destroying her relationships with her own family. Patricia replied with the kind of cold fury that reminded me she had been a successful businesswoman in an era when women had to fight for every opportunity. You used your own parents' love for their daughter as a weapon against her. You tried to turn Marcus against the mother of his child. You attempted to damage Ashley's professional reputation in her own workplace. Derek, you're not the victim here. Jennifer, who had been listening to this exchange with growing horror, suddenly turned on her husband with an anger that surprised everyone present. Derek, I trusted you when you told me that Ashley was jealous of our stability and that she was trying to use Emma to get money from the family. I believed you when you said that Ashley wasn't a good mother and that we needed to protect Tyler from her influence. I even helped you by sharing information about Ashley's personal life because I thought we were helping her. She paused, tears beginning to form in her eyes as the full scope of her husband's manipulation became clear. But you weren't protecting anyone. You were stealing from Ashley and lying to everyone who loved her. You made me an accomplice to hurting a woman who never did anything to deserve it. Catherine seized the moment to present Derek with the legal documents that would formalize his admission of guilt and his agreement to make restitution. Mr. Thompson, you have 24 hours to review these documents with your own attorney and decide whether you want to resolve this matter civilly or face criminal prosecution. I should mention that we have enough evidence to pursue charges in both Ohio and Florida since your fraud campaign crossed state lines. Derek looked around the hallway at his family, the other parents who were watching with obvious disgust, and the legal documents that represented the complete collapse of his carefully constructed lies. For the first time since I had known him, my younger brother looked exactly like what he was, a caught criminal with no remaining options for escape. I'll sign whatever you want, he said, his voice carrying the defeat of someone who finally understood that his victims had been smarter and more prepared than he had anticipated. Marcus nodded with satisfaction. Good choice, Derek, because if you had chosen to fight this, you would have discovered that colonel is not just a title. It comes with resources and connections that would have made your life very difficult. As our group prepared to leave the school, several parents approached us with expressions of support and offers of assistance. The mother who had complimented Emma earlier handed me a business card and suggested that we should arrange a play date for our daughters. The father who had been disgusted by Derek's treatment of Emma offered to provide a character reference if we needed community support for any legal proceedings. Derek stood alone in the hallway, abandoned by his wife, his parents, and his grandmother, holding legal documents that would require him to admit publicly that he had spent months systematically trying to destroy his own sister's life for financial gain. just as it seemed, had a very satisfying sound when it finally arrived. 6 months later, I hosted Emma's 8th birthday party in our new home, a charming 2-bedroom house with a fenced backyard that Patricia's generous gift had allowed us to purchase. The late November afternoon was crisp but sunny, perfect for the outdoor celebration we had planned around Emma's new passion for astronomy and science. The backyard was filled with Emma's classmates from her new school children who knew her as the smart, funny, confident girl she'd always been, rather than the supposedly problematic child that Derek and Jennifer had tried to portray. Maria and her family were there, along with several neighbors who had become genuine friends over the past few months. Dr. Thompson had even stopped by with his wife, bringing a beautiful telescope as a birthday gift and a job promotion that came with increased responsibilities and better pay. Marcus, who had received a permanent transfer to the Columbus area, arrived early to help set up the party decorations and stayed late to help with cleanup. Our co-parenting relationship had evolved into something stronger and more supportive than our marriage had ever been, built on mutual respect and shared commitment to Emma's happiness rather than romantic expectations that neither of us could sustain. Patricia, who had moved from Florida to a senior living community just 20 minutes from our house, had become the grandmother figure Emma had always deserved. She attended every school event, helped with homework when I worked late, and filled our refrigerator with the kind of home-baked cookies that made our house smell like childhood happiness. The most unexpected guest at the party was Jennifer, who had finalized her divorce from Derek 3 months earlier and moved back to her hometown of Dayton. She had driven to Columbus specifically to attend Emma's birthday celebration, bringing a heartfelt apology letter and a commitment to rebuild the relationship she had damaged through her participation in Derek's manipulation campaign. Ashley, I know that words can't undo the harm I caused, but I want Emma to understand that the adults in her life made terrible mistakes that had nothing to do with her worth or importance, Jennifer said as we watched the children play telescope games in the backyard. Derek convinced me that we were protecting Tyler from a bad influence, but the truth is that Emma has always been a wonderful influence on Tyler, and I robbed both children of a close cousin relationship because I believed lies instead of trusting my own observations. Jennifer's transformation had been remarkable to witness. Freed from Derek's constant manipulation and gaslighting, she had rediscovered her own judgment and integrity. She had also provided crucial testimony for the legal proceedings that had resulted in Derek facing real consequences for his actions. My parents arrived near the end of the party, still carrying the shame of their unknowing participation in Derek's financial fraud, but working hard to rebuild their relationship with Emma and me. They had terminated Derek's access to all business accounts, recovered the stolen money with interest, and established a college fund for Emma that Derek could never touch. We should have trusted our own daughter instead of believing that our son knew better how to manage her life, my father said as he watched Emma demonstrate her new telescope to her friends. Derek convinced us that questioning him meant we didn't trust his judgment, but we should have questioned him when his judgment conflicted with what we knew about you. The most satisfying moment of the party came when Emma stood on a small step stool in front of her assembled friends and family to give a thank you speech that she had written herself. Her confidence had blossomed over the past 6 months as she experienced what it felt like to be surrounded by people who genuinely valued and supported her. Thank you, everyone, for coming to my birthday party and for being the kind of people who think kids are important enough to celebrate, she said, her clear voice carrying across the backyard with the natural poise of a child who had learned early that her words mattered. This year, I learned that real family isn't just people who are related to you, but people who show up when you need them and treat you with kindness, even when things are difficult. She paused to smile at Marcus, who was beaming with pride from his position near the telescope. My daddy taught me that standing up for what's right is always worth it, even when it's scary. My mommy showed me that being strong doesn't mean being mean to other people. Grandma Patricia proved that love is something you choose to give, not something you owe to people just because they're related to you. Emma's speech continued with 8-year-old wisdom that brought tears to several adult eyes. I want to thank everyone who helped my family become happier and safer. Sometimes bad things happen because people make bad choices, but good people always help fix the bad things and make everything better. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, I found myself standing in my kitchen, surrounded by the comfortable chaos of a successful celebration, when my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. The message was from Derek, whose number I had blocked months earlier, but who had apparently found a new way to reach me. Ashley, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know that I've been going to counseling, and I understand now how much I hurt you and Emma. I was wrong about everything, and I'm sorry. I hope someday you can forgive me, and I hope Emma knows that she was always important enough. She was always more important than my pride or my jealousy or my need to control everything. I lost my family because I couldn't accept that you were succeeding without my help, and I tried to tear down your success instead of celebrating it. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that you won because you were right and I was wrong about everything that mattered. I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling a complex mixture of vindication, sadness, and closure. Derek's apology was probably genuine, born from months of facing the consequences of his actions and losing everything he had claimed to be protecting. But forgiveness was not something I owed him, and his acknowledgement of wrongdoing was more about his own healing than about repairing the damage he had caused. I deleted the message without responding and turned my attention back to the present moment where Emma was showing Patricia how to work the dishwasher while Marcus packed leftover birthday cake into containers for our guests to take home. This was the life Derek had tried to destroy, and this was the life we had built in spite of his efforts to tear it down. As I tucked Emma into bed that night, surrounded by the birthday cards and small gifts that represented genuine affection from people who valued her exactly as she was, I realized that Derek's cruelty had inadvertently led us to the most authentic relationships we had ever experienced. The people who remained in our lives were there because they chose to be, not because of family obligation or social expectation. "Mommy, was this the best birthday party ever?" Emma asked as I turned off her bedroom light, leaving only the soft glow from her new star projector casting constellations on the ceiling. "I think it was pretty perfect, sweetheart. What was your favorite part?" "I liked that everyone who came really wanted to be there, and I liked that I got to thank people for being nice to me. I think saying thank you might be even better than getting presents." As I closed Emma's door and headed to my own bedroom, I reflected on the year that had transformed our family from victims of manipulation into architects of our own happiness. Derek's declaration that Emma wasn't important enough had ultimately proven to be the catalyst that revealed who in our lives truly understood her worth. The people who celebrated Emma's 8th birthday were the people who would celebrate her high school graduation, her college achievements, and all the milestones yet to come. They were the family we chose, and the family that chose us bound together, not by blood or obligation, but by the kind of love that shows up consistently, especially when it's needed most. Derek had been wrong about everything, but he had been most wrong about Emma's importance. She wasn't just important enough to attend a graduation party. She was important enough to inspire an entire family to choose truth over comfort, justice over peace, and authentic love over convenient lies. And that I realized as I fell asleep in my own home surrounded by the evidence of genuine community and support was the kind of importance that no one could ever take away. Have you ever had to stand up to a family member who was treating your child unfairly? How did you find the courage to put your child's well-being above family peace? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below about times when you had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting what matters most. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family challenges and triumphs. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that they have the strength to stand up for themselves and their children, even when it means facing difficult truths about the people they love. Thank you for taking this journey with me, and remember that you and your children are always important enough to be treated with respect and kindness. Sometimes the hardest battles we fight are the ones that lead us to the most beautiful victory.